A woman sits in her car at 3 a.m., tears streaming down her face as she stares at her phone screen. She's been refreshing her bank account for the 100th time tonight, hoping the numbers will somehow change. Earlier that day, she lit candles, pulled tarot cards, and searched desperately for angel numbers on license plates. She's been manifesting for months, following every technique, seeking every sign, yet her reality remains unchanged. She whispers into the darkness, "Why won't the universe respond to me?" What she doesn't realize is that the universe has been responding all along. Every tear, every desperate search, every moment of lack, it's all been a perfect reflection of her inner state. She's been seeking signs when she should have been becoming one. Most people live their entire lives in this state of spiritual beggary. They pray to gods outside themselves, wait for circumstances to change, and search frantically for proof that their desires are on their way. They've been taught that manifestation is about asking nicely and waiting patiently, about being worthy enough to receive blessings from some external source. This is the greatest lie ever told. The truth is far more radical, far more empowering, and far more immediate than anything you've been taught. You are not a beggar at the feast of life. You are not waiting for permission from the universe. You are not seeking signs because you already are the sign. Every moment of your experience is reflecting back to you the assumptions you hold about yourself and your world. When you truly understand this, everything changes. The woman in the car, the man checking his horoscope, the seeker pulling cards, they're all looking in the wrong direction. They're searching outside for what can only be found within. They're asking, when will it happen? When they should be asking, what am I assuming to be true about my seed? Off right now? The very act of seeking signs reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of reality. It assumes you are separate from your desires, that there's some external force deciding your fate, that you must prove yourself worthy of your good. But consciousness, your consciousness, is the only reality. Everything else is merely its shadow, its reflection, its inevitable expression. Think about it. Every tyrant, every prophet, every leader who has ever held power over masses of people understood one simple truth. Most human beings will gladly give away their creative power in exchange for the illusion of security. They will bow to external authorities, seek permission from institutions, and wait for signs from sources outside themselves rather than claim their birthright as creators of their own experience. This pattern is as old as civilization itself. In ancient times, people traveled great distances to consult oracles, believing that divine wisdom came from sacred caves and mysterious priestesses. They would bring offerings, wait in long lines, and hang on every cryptic word, never questioning why the answers they sought couldn't be found within their own consciousness. The priests and priestesses of ancient temples understood something profound about human nature. People desperately want to believe that someone else knows better than they do. It's easier to seek guidance from an external authority than to take responsibility for your own creative power. So temples became wealthy, oracles became powerful, and entire populations learned to live as spiritual dependents rather than conscious creators. This wasn't an accident. Those who understood the true nature of consciousness deliberately created systems that kept others in states of seeking and dependency. They knew that a person who constantly looks outside themselves for answers will never discover the kingdom of heaven within. They will remain consumers of spiritual content rather than creators of spiritual reality. The biblical statement, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," wasn't meant as pretty poetry. It was a radical declaration that God, infinite creative power, exists as your own I am consciousness. But this truth was too dangerous to be taught openly. Instead, it was hidden behind symbols, rituals, and external practices that kept people focused outward rather than inward. When you pray to God out there, you're actually praying to your own infinite self, but you don't know it. When you ask for signs from the universe, you're asking your own consciousness to reflect back to you what you already believe to be true. When you seek guidance from external sources, you're looking for permission to claim what is already yours by right of consciousness. This pattern of external seeking has only intensified in our modern world. Now we have entire industries built around keeping people in states of spiritual seeking rather than spiritual knowing. Social media algorithms become our oracles, telling us what to think and feel based on our past behavior. Dating apps become our matchmake. Is supposedly knowing better than we do who we should love. Financial advisors become our prosperity gurus, claiming to understand money better than our own creative consciousness does. Even in spiritual communities, this pattern persists. People spend thousands of dollars on courses that promise to teach them how to manifest when the only thing they need to learn is how to assume. They attend workshops on finding their purpose when their purpose is simply to know themselves as the operant power in their own lives. They seek gurus and teachers who will give them permission to claim their desires when they are the only authority needed. The modern manifestation movement, for all its popularity, has largely become another form of external seeking. People collect techniques like they're collecting baseball cards, always looking for the newest method, the most powerful ritual, the perfect combination of words that will finally make their desires appear. They're still operating from the assumption that manifestation is something done to them rather than something done by them. But consciousness doesn't work that way. Your brain is not receiving signals from some cosmic ordering system. Your nervous system is not tuned into universal frequencies that determine your fate. These are all metaphors that keep you focused in the wrong direction. The truth is much simpler and much more immediate. Your brain is creating your reality moment by moment based on what you assume to be true about yourself and your world. Every thought you think, every feeling you feel, every assumption you hold is literally rewiring your neural pathways and reshaping your perception of what's possible. This isn't mystical theory, it's measurable science. Neuroscientists now understand that your brain cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you assume something to be true and feel it as real, your nervous system begins to reorganize itself around that assumption. New neural pathways form, old patterns dissolve, and your entire biochemistry shifts to match your new internal state. This is why techniques work, not because they petition some external force, but because they help you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. When you visualize, you're not sending requests to the universe. You're literally rehearsing new neural patterns. When you affirm, you're not trying to convince God to give you something. You're convincing your own nervous system that a new reality is already true. The validation loop that keeps people seeking is actually a neurological addiction. Every time you look for external confirmation of your desires, you're reinforcing the neural pathway that says, I don't have it yet. Your brain learns to seek rather than to assume, to hope rather than to know, to wait rather than to claim. This is why the harder you seek signs, the more elusive your desires become. You're literally training your nervous system to expect lack, delay, and separation from your good. Every desperate search for proof is actually an assumption that proof is needed, which means you're assuming you don't already have what you want. Precede. People who transform their lives quickly are not the ones who seek the most signs. They're the ones who stop seeking and start assuming. They understand that the feeling of having their desire is the cause of having it, not the result of it. They know that their assumptions about themselves and their world are the creative force, not their actions, not their techniques, and certainly not external signs. When someone assumes wealth, their nervous system begins to operate from abundance. They notice opportunities they previously overlooked. They make decisions from a place of plenty rather than scarcity, and they naturally begin to create circumstances that match their internal state. The external world doesn't change first. Their assumption changes first, and then the world reorganizes itself to match. This is the observer effect in action. In quantum physics, the very act of observation changes what is being observed. Your consciousness, your assumptions, your beliefs, your feeling states is constantly observing and therefore constantly creating your reality. You are not passive recipients of random events. You are active creators whose inner states determine outer experiences. But here's what most people miss. You're creating all the time, whether you know it or not. The person seeking signs is creating just as actively as the person assuming their desire fulfilled. They're just creating from a different set of assumptions. They're assuming they need signs, so they get a reality that provides endless seeking without satisfaction. They're assuming they're separate from their desires, so they get a reality that reflects separation. Your current circumstances are not happening to you, they're happening from you. Every limitation you experience is a reflection of a limiting assumption you hold. Every lack in your life corresponds to an assumption of insufficiency. Every delay you encounter matches an assumption that your good is not yet here. This understanding completely changes how you approach manifestation. Instead of asking, how can I get what I want? You ask, what would I assume to be true about myself if I already had what I want? Instead of seeking techniques to change your circumstances, you identify the assumptions that created those circumstances in the first place. The woman crying in her car at 3 a.m. is not a victim of cruel circumstances. She's experiencing the faithful reflection of her own consciousness. Her tears are not evidence that manifestation doesn't work. They're evidence that it works perfectly. She's been assuming lack, feeling lack, and expecting lack, so lack is exactly what she's created. But the moment she understands this, everything can change. The moment she realizes that her consciousness is the creative power, she can stop seeking signs and start being one. She can move from hoping to knowing, from asking to claiming, from waiting to living, as if her desire is already fulfilled. This shift doesn't require years of study or complicated techniques. It requires one simple recognition: I am is the creative power. And whatever follows, I am is what you will experience. If you say, I am lacking, you will experience lack. If you say, I am abundant, you will experience abundance. If you say, I am waiting for signs, you will experience endless waiting. But if you say, I am the sign, if you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, if you live from the end rather than hoping for the end, then your external world has no choice but to reflect this new internal reality. This is not positive thinking or wishful fantasy. This is the fundamental law by which consciousness operates. The modern science seeker has more opportunities than ever to avoid their own creative power. They wake up and immediately reach for their phone, scrolling through social media feeds that function as digital oracles. The algorithm knows their desires, their fears, their patterns of seeking, and it feeds them content designed to keep them in that endless loop of searching without finding. They follow manifestation coaches who promise that the universe is conspiring in their favor, not realizing that consciousness, their consciousness, is the only conspiracy that matters. They download apps that send them daily affirmations, as if hearing the right words from an external source will somehow override the assumptions they hold about themselves. They join online communities where thousands of people share their success stories, hoping that reading about others' experiences will somehow validate their own worthiness. The digital age has created the most sophisticated system of external seeking in human history. Every click, every swipe, every search is recorded and analyzed, creating a profile of your desires that is then used to sell you more seeking. The algorithm doesn't want you to find what you're looking for, it wants you to keep looking. A satisfied seeker is no longer a profitable seeker. Social media platforms have become modern temples where people go to worship at the altar of external validation. They post their desires disguised as gratitude, hoping the universe will see their appreciation and respond accordingly. They share inspirational quotes and manifestation tips, not understanding that they're reinforcing their identity as someone who needs inspiration rather than someone who is the source of it. The spiritual marketplace has exploded with products designed to keep you seeking. Crystal vendors promise that the right stone will amplify your manifestation power. Tarot readers offer to reveal your future as if it's already written somewhere outside your own consciousness. Energy healers claim to remove blocks and align your chakras as if your creative power depends on some external adjustment rather than internal assumption. Even the language of modern spirituality reinforces external seeking. People talk about raising their vibration as if they need to match some cosmic frequency. They speak of aligning with the universe as if there's some separate entity they need to please. They use phrases like co-creating with God, as if consciousness is a partnership rather than their own infinite being expressing itself. The political realm offers another avenue for sign-seeking behavior. People lead to leaders, governments, and institutions to create the changes they wish to see in the world. They vote with the assumption that someone else has the power to make their lives better. They protest and petition, believing that external forces must shift before their personal reality can improve. This isn't to diminish the importance of social action, but to point out the assumptions underlying it. When you act from the assumption that you are powerless and that change must come from outside, you create more of that powerless reality. When you act from the assumption that you are the change you wish to see, that consciousness is the creative force, then your actions become expressions of your internal power rather than attempts to gain external power. Even within communities of supposedly awakened individuals, the pattern persists. They gather to discuss conspiracy theories, seeking signs that the world is changing, that truth is being revealed, that some external force will eventually rescue humanity from its current state. They're still operating from the assumption that they are victims of circumstances rather than creators of them. When something happens that contradicts your desired reality, you don't accept it as permanent fact. You revise it in consciousness, replaying the scene as you would have preferred it to unfold. This is not denial of reality. This is recognition that consciousness is the only reality, and what appears to be factual is simply yesterday's assumption made manifest. Through revision, you learn that the past is not fixed. Memory is not passive recording, but active creation. Every time you remember something, you're actually recreating it in consciousness. This means you can change your past by changing how you remember it. And in changing your past, you change your future, because your future grows out of the assumptions embedded in your memories. The death of the seeker is not a loss, but a liberation. When you stop being someone who needs to find answers, you become someone who embodies wisdom. When you stop being someone who lacks something, you become someone whose very being is abundance. When you stop being someone who hopes for good things, you become someone whose consciousness naturally produces good experiences. This death is not dramatic or painful. It's more like waking up from a dream. One moment you're lost in the story of seeking and struggling, and the next moment you remember who you are. The seeking self was never real. It was just a role you were playing, an identity you had assumed without realizing you were assuming it. Living from this new identity requires constant vigilance, not against the world, but against your own habitual thoughts and feelings. The mind, trained in seeking patterns, will try to revert to old ways of thinking. It will present problems that seem to require external solutions. It will create scenarios that appear to prove your limitations. It will offer very convincing reasons why you should return to hoping instead of knowing. But once you've tasted the freedom of assumption, once you've experienced the immediate responsiveness of consciousness to your inner states, you can never fully return to the old way of being. You may temporarily forget who you are, but you can never permanently lose the knowing that you are the creative power in your own experience. The internal shift creates an unmistakable change in how you move through the world. Your walk becomes different, not because you're trying to appear confident, but because confidence is your natural state when you know yourself as consciousness itself. Your voice changes, not because you're practicing speaking with authority, but because you are the authority in your own life. People begin to respond to you differently, not because you're manipulating them, but because you're no longer seeking anything from them. You're no longer trying to get love, approval, recognition, or validation. You're expressing love, approval, recognition, and validation from the fullness of your own being. This change in your energy field attracts completely different experiences. Relationships that were built on mutual seeking and validation may no longer serve this new version of you. The conspiracy trap is particularly seductive because it gives people someone to blame for their limitations, while simultaneously providing the hope that external forces will eventually set things right. It keeps them focused outward, looking for signs of global change rather than becoming the change they wish to see in their own consciousness. All of this seeking creates a secondary market of spiritual dependency. Instead of teaching people to access their own creative power, entire industries have developed around keeping them as permanent students, eternal seekers, lifetime consumers of spiritual content. The teacher-student relationship becomes another form of external authority that prevents people from recognizing their own infinite nature. But the most subtle trap of all is seeking signs that you're on the right path. Even people who understand the law of assumption often fall into this pattern. They assume their desire fulfilled, then look for evidence that it's working. They live from the end for a while, then check to see if the end is manifesting. They're still making their inner state dependent on outer confirmation. This is why so many people experience what they call manifestation blocks or resistance from the universe. They're not experiencing blocks, they're experiencing the perfect reflection of their divided consciousness. Part of them assumes their desire is fulfilled while another part seeks proof that it's true. The seeking cancels out the assumption and they remain in the familiar state of waiting and hoping. The anatomy of a sign seeker reveals someone who fundamentally believes they are separate from their desires, separate from their power, and separate from their good. They may use spiritual language and practice manifestation techniques, but their core assumption remains unchanged. Something outside of me must change before I can have what I want. This assumption is so deeply embedded in human consciousness that most people never question it. They accept it as reality rather than recognizing it as a choice. They live their entire lives as second-hand people, consuming second-hand experiences, waiting for first-hand life to finally arrive. But there comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the seeking itself becomes unbearable. The constant looking outside, the endless waiting for signs, the perpetual hope that tomorrow will be different, it all becomes too exhausting to maintain. This is actually the beginning of wisdom, the first crack in the shell of external dependency. When seeking becomes suffering, you're ready for the great reversal. When hoping becomes hopeless, you're prepared to stop hoping and start knowing. When waiting becomes unbearable, you're ready to stop waiting and start living as if your desire is already fulfilled. The great reversal is not a technique or a method, it's a complete shift in identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who needs to manifest their desires, you begin to see yourself as someone whose desires are the natural expression of their consciousness. Instead of assuming you lack what you want, you assume you are what you want. This reversal begins with understanding that your desires are not separate from you. They are you, pushing against the limitations you've accepted about yourself. Every want, every wish, every longing is consciousness seeking fuller expression through your experience. Your desires are not asking permission to manifest. They're asking permission to be recognized as already complete within your infinite being. When you truly understand this, seeking becomes impossible. How can you seek what you already are? How can you wait for what is already present in consciousness? How can you look for signs when you realize you are the sign that reality is consciousness expressing itself as your personal experience? The law of assumption becomes not something you do, but something you are. Assumption is not a technique you apply. It's the natural function of consciousness itself. Every moment you are assuming something to be true about yourself and your world. The question is not whether you're assuming, but what you're assuming. Most people assume they are human beings having occasional spiritual experiences. The great reversal reveals that you are a spiritual being, infinite consciousness, having a human experience. Most people assume they need to get somewhere, become someone, achieve something. The reversal shows you that you are already everything you could ever want to be, and your external experience is simply catching up to this internal reality. This is why Neville taught that feeling is the secret. Not because feeling creates reality, but because feeling reveals what you're assuming to be real. If you feel lack, you're assuming lack. If you feel abundance, you're assuming abundance. If you feel like you're waiting for your good, you're assuming it's not here yet. If you feel like you already have your desire, you're assuming it's already yours. The reversal happens when you stop trying to feel differently in order to get something, and start feeling as if you already have it, because you recognize that consciousness, your consciousness, is the only reality. Everything else is just its reflection, its shadow, its inevitable expression. Living from the end is not a visualization technique. It's a recognition that the end is where you already are. In consciousness, your desire is already fulfilled. Time is just the interval it takes for this internal reality to objectify itself as external experience. But you don't wait for the objectification. You live from the fulfillment that already exists within you. When you make this shift, everything changes. You stop asking when will it happen, because you realize it has already happened in the only place it could happen, in consciousness. You stop looking for signs because you understand that you are the sign, that your very existence is proof that consciousness is creating reality through your assumptions about yourself. The transformation process is both immediate and gradual. The shift in identity happens in an instant, the moment you truly realize that I am is the creative power and that you are that I am. But the full expression of this new identity through your external experience unfolds over what we call time. This can be confusing for people who are used to measuring spiritual progress by external changes. They make the internal shift, recognize themselves as consciousness itself, assume the feeling of their wish fulfilled, and then wonder why their bank account hasn't changed yet, why their relationship status is the same, why their circumstances appear unchanged. But consciousness doesn't work according to human impatience. It works according to natural law. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You trust the process, water it regularly, and allow it to unfold in its own timing. The same principle applies to assumptions. Once you've assumed the feeling of your wish fulfilled, once you've claimed your desire as already complete in consciousness, you allow this internal reality to express itself without constantly checking for external proof. The old patterns will resist this new way of being. Your mind, accustomed to seeking and hoping and waiting, will try to pull you back into familiar states of lack and limitation. This is not failure, it's simply momentum from your previous assumptions trying to maintain itself. The key is to gently redirect your attention back to the feeling of fulfillment, back to the assumption that your desire is already yours. During this transition period, you may notice that your external world seems to test your new assumptions. Circumstances may appear that directly contradict what you've claimed to be true about yourself. This is not the universe working against you. This is consciousness giving you opportunities to choose your new identity over your old one. Every time you maintain your assumption in the face of contradictory evidence, you strengthen the neural pathways of your new identity. Eve. Every time you feel from the end despite current circumstances, you're rehearsing the consciousness that will eventually express itself as changed circumstances. The ripple effect of your transformation extends far beyond your personal experience. As you stop seeking and start being, as you move from hoping to knowing, as you live from the end rather than hoping for the end, you become a different presence in the world. People feel this shift in you even when they can't articulate what's changed. Your consciousness, no longer divided between what you want and what you have, becomes a unified field of creative power. This coherence affects everyone around you. Some people will be inspired by your transformation, sensing the possibility of their own freedom from seeking. Others may be disturbed by it, feeling challenged by your refusal to join them in states of lack and limitation. This is why transformation often involves changes in relationships, career, and social circles. As your consciousness changes, you naturally attract circumstances and people that match your new assumptions about yourself. The old life built on old assumptions begins to dissolve as the new life, reflecting new assumptions, takes its place. Living as the sign means recognizing that every moment of your experience is showing you exactly what you've assumed to be true about yourself and your world. Instead of judging these reflections as good or bad, wanted or unwanted, you begin to see them as perfect feedback about your inner state. When you truly understand that you are the sign, everything becomes meaningful in a completely new way. A delayed payment is not the universe testing you. It's consciousness reflecting an assumption about timing or worthiness that you're still holding. An unexpected opportunity is not luck or coincidence. It's consciousness expressing your assumption of deserving good things. This level of personal responsibility can feel overwhelming at first. It means there's no one to blame for unwanted experiences and no one to credit for wanted ones except your own consciousness. But this responsibility is actually the greatest gift you could receive because it means you have complete authority over your experience of life. The paradox of this new understanding reveals itself immediately. The moment you stop seeking signs, everything becomes a sign of your creative power. The delayed train that once frustrated you now serves as a reminder to examine what you've been assuming about time and timing. The unexpected compliment from a stranger becomes confirmation that your new self-concept is radiating into the world. The bill that arrives in the mail is no longer evidence of financial pressure, but an opportunity to assume abundance while handling your responsibilities. This is not about positive thinking or pretending circumstances don't matter. This is about recognizing that circumstances are always reflecting consciousness, and consciousness can be changed in an instant through assumption. When you know yourself as the operant power in your own experience, every circumstance becomes raw material for creation rather than evidence of limitation. The mirror principle operates with mathematical precision. External reality cannot deviate from internal assumption. If you assume you are unloved, the world will provide experiences that confirm this belief. If you assume you are abundant, abundance will find countless ways to express itself through your experience. If you assume you are powerful, you will find yourself in situations that call forth your power. Most people have this backwards. They think they need evidence of love before they can feel loved, evidence of abundance before they can feel abundant, evidence of power before they can feel powerful. But consciousness works in reverse. You must assume the feeling first, and then consciousness arranges circumstances to match that feeling. This is why techniques work when they work and fail when they fail. A technique that helps you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled will produce results. A technique that keeps you hoping, wishing, or trying to get something will produce more hoping, wishing, and trying. The technique itself has no power. All power lies in the assumption it helps you embody. Revision becomes a natural part of this new way of living. Jobs that required you to diminish yourself to fit in may become impossible to maintain. Social circles that bonded over complaints and limitations may feel increasingly uncomfortable. This is not failure. This is consciousness reorganizing your life to match your new assumptions about yourself. The resistance you encounter, both internal and external, is actually confirmation that transformation is occurring. If nothing in your life felt challenged or different, it would mean nothing in your consciousness had really changed. The friction you experience is yesterday's reality giving way to tomorrow's possibility. During this transition, it becomes crucial to persist in your new assumptions despite contrary evidence. This is where most people fail. They make the internal shift, but then allow external circumstances to convince them it wasn't real. They assume abundance, but then let a bill in the mail prove to them that they're still lacking. They assume love, but then let one person's rejection convince them they're still unworthy. Persistence doesn't mean stubbornly ignoring reality. It means knowing which reality is primary. Consciousness is primary. Assumption is primary. Feeling is primary. Circumstances are secondary, always following consciousness with perfect faithfulness, but never leading it. The sign that you've successfully made this transition is paradoxical. You stop needing signs. When you know yourself as the creative power, when you live from the end rather than hoping for it, when you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled as your natural state, you no longer require external confirmation of your internal reality. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to your external experience. It means you understand the relationship correctly. External experience reflects internal assumption, not the other way around. You can enjoy good circumstances without becoming dependent on them, and you can navigate challenging circumstances without being defeated by them. Your life becomes an ongoing demonstration of consciousness in action. Every day brings new opportunities to choose assumption over appearance, feeling over fact, internal authority over external validation. You become living proof that reality is malleable, that consciousness is creative, that what appears to be solid and unchangeable is actually fluid and responsive. But perhaps the most profound change is that you stop needing your life to be different in order to be happy. Happiness, fulfillment, peace, and love are revealed to be your natural state, not something you achieve by getting your desires. The desires are still there and they still manifest, but they manifest from fullness rather than emptiness, from abundance rather than lack. The mirror reflects with perfect accuracy, but now what it reflects is consciousness aware of itself as the creator of all experience. Every reflection becomes a celebration of your creative power rather than evidence of your limitations. Every circumstance becomes an opportunity to experience yourself as the infinite being you've always been, playing in the field of time and space. When other people look at your life, they may see success, abundance, love, or achievement. But what you know is that these are simply the shadows cast by consciousness knowing itself. The real transformation is not in what you have, but in what you know yourself to be. You have remembered that you are not the character in the story, you are the author, the reader, and the story itself. This remembering spreads naturally to others, not through preaching or teaching, but through being. As you live from assumption rather than seeking signs, as you embody the feeling of your wish fulfilled rather than hoping for it, as you express the love and abundance and power that you are rather than trying to get it from the world, you become a living invitation for others to remember who they are. Some will accept this invitation consciously, asking you how you changed, wanting to understand the principles you've discovered. Others will accept it unconsciously, simply feeling better in your presence, finding themselves naturally assuming more positive states when they're around you. Still others will resist it, feeling threatened by your refusal to join them in limitation, but even their resistance serves consciousness by showing them exactly what they're choosing to assume about life. The ultimate recognition is that there was never anything wrong with seeking signs. Seeking is just another way consciousness explores itself. The seeker and the one who has found are both expressions of the same infinite being. The journey from seeking to being is not about right and wrong, but about expansion and contraction, about consciousness experiencing itself from every possible angle. But there comes a time in this exploration when seeking becomes suffering, when the questions become more painful than the answers, when the longing for truth becomes unbearable. This is when consciousness calls its elf home, when the prodigal son remembers his father's house, when the dreamer wakes up and realizes he was never separate from what he was seeking. You stand now at this threshold. Behind you lies the familiar world of hoping and seeking and waiting for life to happen to you. Ahead of you lies the recognition that you are life happening, that you are consciousness creating reality through assumption, that you are the sign you've been seeking. The choice is yours, as it has always been. You can continue seeking signs, and consciousness will faithfully provide you with endless seeking. You can continue hoping your life will change, and consciousness will reflect back to you a reality where change is always just out of reach. You can continue being a second-hand person, living a second-hand life, and consciousness will give you exactly that experience. or you can choose to remember what you've always been but had forgotten. You can choose to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled and live from that assumption regardless of current circumstances. You can choose to be the sign rather than seek the sign, to be the answer rather than ask the question, to be the fulfillment rather than hope for it. This is not positive thinking. This is not self-help. This is not even spirituality in the way most people understand it. This is the fundamental recognition of what you are. Infinite consciousness expressing itself as your personal experience. Everything else is just elaboration on this simple truth. The mirror is broken. The old reflection that showed you as limited, lacking, and separate has shattered completely. What will you create in its place? What will you assume to be true about yourself now that you know assumption is the creative power? How will you live now that you understand that living itself is consciousness exploring its own infinite nature? The answer to these questions will not be found in books, courses, teachers, or techniques. The answer will be found in the feeling you choose in this moment, in the assumption you make about yourself right now, in your willingness to be what you wish to experience rather than seek it outside yourself. You are consciousness itself, dreaming the dream of being human. The dream can be beautiful or terrifying, abundant or lacking, loving or fearful, all depending on what the dreamer assumes to be real. The question is not whether you have the power to create your reality. The question is what reality you choose to create with the power you've never not had. Stop seeking signs. You are the sign that consciousness is awake and creating through assumption. Stop waiting for your life to begin. You are life itself, expressing as the unique experience of being you. Stop looking for God outside yourself. I am is the name of God, and that I am is your very own consciousness, the only reality there is. This is your inheritance, your birthright, your true nature. Not something you earn or achieve or become worthy of, but something you are and have always been. The seeking was just consciousness playing hide and seek with itself, temporarily forgetting its own nature in order to experience the joy of remembering. Now you remember. Now you know. Now you are free to create from knowledge rather than ignorance, from assumption rather than hope, from the end rather than the beginning. The mirror reflects exactly what you are. Infinite creative consciousness, playing in the field of time and space, forever free to be whatever you choose to assume yourself to be,